Hey everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I have another interview for you today. I got to sit down with Brandon from Dismay Comics to talk about his newest comic Kickstarter. Dismay Comics is a horror anthology series. I got to check out a couple issues. Really cool stuff. I've said it a million times. I love a good anthology series, and horror is ripe for it. And I really have to point out that I loved the first issue of his. Nothing wrong with the second, but I really loved the first issue that he sent me, which is a kind of horror trippy movie theater thing, and the art is phenomenal. It's this kind of like looks like brushed oil colors, oil paints. It has like this thickness and weight to it that really serve with the environment he was going for. Anyway, you can check it out on Kickstarter. Enjoy the interview. Hey everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I'm sitting down with Brandon from Dismay Comics to talk about his new comic, Dismay Avenue. How you doing, Brandon?
Doing pretty good.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to come on. We had a bit of scheduling stuff, but it's cool that we made it happen and within your Kickstarter window.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So before we get to everything going on right now, I always like to go all the way back to the beginning. What got you into comics as a fan and into comics as a creator?
So what got me into comics as a fan kind of started from when I was like 7 or 8. I went to a yard sale and got a whole shoebox full of comics, and it was all kinds of different stuff. It was Amazing Spider-Man, Superman, all this stuff from like the 70s and 80s. And I got into comics that way, just reading random floppies, like random issues in a random arc, like part 4 of this 10-part arc or whatever. But I really enjoyed it. And then in high school, I started reading like serialized, like issue by issue, following along with like Scott Snyder's New 52 Batman run, like stuff like that really got me into picking up issue after issue. What got me into the creator aspect, the creator side of things, was after high school, I really got into script writing, like screenplay writing and stuff like that. And as I was doing that, there were some scripts where I was like, I think I would love to see this more in a comic book form than I would on a screen, whether it's TV or movie or whatever. Like, I think this works better as a comic. So I just went in, reworked some of those scripts and made them into comics. And like one of the first examples is The Gallows Man. It's kind of my first series that I published, like put out there through Kickstarter, where it was like a golden age, silver age superhero satire parody story that basically felt like 1960s Adam West fun, campiness mixed with like Quentin Tarantino movie violence. Like that was basically the series. And I, when writing it into a comic script from a film script, because it was a feature-length film script, I reworked it to where it was a 4-issue miniseries. And that's kind of examples of how I got into the comic writing aspect of things.
So are you sole writer, or do you also draw, color, letter, all that?
I wish I could do art. I admire art. I absolutely love art. I'll go to art museum or just be scrolling through like artist Instagram pages and portfolios like half the day. But no, I can do stick figures. That's about it. But I do love it. I write, I edit. When it comes to the comics, I produce through self-publishing. I do everything but the art. But the thing with comics is the art is the critical, crucial part.
Right.
So finding those artists was great. Finding the specific artist for something like Dismay Avenue, because there's so many different art styles. Absolutely awesome. I do wish I could do the art, but I'm glad I'm able to work with such great creators and artists that I could never come close to that type of art, even if I spent decades trying to do it.
Right, yeah. And it's, you brought it, I mean, you obviously brought it up because we're here to talk about Dismay Avenue is an anthology horror series. So even if you were doing art, you would still have other artists collaborating with, so you get different flavors.
Oh, yeah.
So do you strictly write horror, or is it just happen to be that, like, because Gallows Man doesn't sound like it was horror exactly, but maybe it had some flair to it?
No, I write kind of all kinds of different genres. Like the stuff that I've published are Gallows Man and Dismay Avenue, but there's a bunch of different genres and series that I'm still currently writing and will eventually see the light of day. But I'd say horror is the thing that comes easiest to me, or I should say I can write a good horror script quicker than I can write another genre good script in that way. Um, I just kind of grew up on horror, so it was one of those things where it just, I don't know, like I do enjoy writing all different genres, but that's the one that just comes easiest to me. Like if I'm struggling writing this one script over here, and it's like, I want to write today, but I've got nothing to write on this. It's like, okay, my fallback is go to horror because I can always write something there. Like I never have roadblocks when it comes to horror.
Right, it's ingrained in you.
Yeah.
Very cool. So for your writing process, you said you first started getting into screenplays. Did you get any kind of like self-education in that, or did you just kind of like look up the format, read a couple books, dive in?
It was yeah, like a ton of me seeking that education where it was just dozens, if not hundreds of hours of YouTube videos, books, learning about, yeah, proper formatting, and then watching a ton of movies, reading a good bit of screenplays just to see different styles and stuff. Because with a screenplay, like there is a specific format, but everyone kind of has their own style. Like some people are like, when describing something, like cussing willy-nilly, dealing with that or whatever, various stuff. And I learned a lot through those hundreds of hours doing that. And then whenever I wanted to get into creating comics, that's another dozens to hundreds of hours of learning. But it was one of those things where I absolutely love it. Like I'm glad I educated myself on that rather than look up a couple things and then like, okay, let's do it. Let's go from here. Cause I like my work. I think all creators should like your own work if you're going to put it out for other people to see. So I really like my work. But if I didn't do as much education and stuff towards trying to make it the best it can be, then when it gets put out, it's like, oh, like it's probably not going to get the best feedback. I wanted to make sure all the projects I do are good. I want to make sure first I like it because there's a bias there. It's like, yeah, I'm the writer. You should like your own stuff, but you should go all in with it. Like if you're strictly just writing and editing, make sure it's the best you can be. And then even if you have a budget, look for the best artist that will fit those stories. Even if it takes time, if you can't make it right then, if you can't be like, I can't find a specific artist now that can work on this book that fits the style that I want, wait. Like if you have to wait a year or a year and a half or whatever, and you see an artist appear, then that's fine. Because you want those books to be the best they can be, especially with like my stuff. Cause I'm like new out the gate. Like I've been making comics since early 2019, but the books haven't started getting published since early 2021. So I want to make sure I have the best first impression on the readers rather than, he's got some okay work. I want people to be like, dang, this is his first work. Like, that's what I want.
That's a great attitude. And I think it's also really good advice for anyone listening to this who is a creator or wants to be a creator. Is it's exciting to get your first thing going and you want to get it out in the world. But if you rush through it, or if you say it's good enough, that's going to come across in the work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
First and foremost.
Oh, yeah.
People can tell if you pour, even if it's not the best story or the best or whatever your particular thing is, not you, but people in general.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
If it's not the best you can do at the time, I mean, because you're always going to get better too.
Yeah.
It comes across, and I think that's really important to notice because I almost fell into that trap myself. Is like, let's just do something and get it out there, and it's like, no, let's pump the brakes, and it's better that way. And have you found that kind of natural progression where, of course, the first thing you officially put out there at the time was the best it could be, and then once you get to like your third thing, do you look back at the first and then like, oh man, I wish I could redo it?
I'd say there's for me, I guess this is extra advice stuff. Hopefully I don't go on rambling about this.
No, great. It's good.
Some of the first comics I made were Dismay Avenue issues 1 and 2, and then The Gallows Man. Those were some of the first things I made. And I made sure I was constantly going back, editing, like looking through the pages, even as they're being made, just looking through them constantly, making sure everything fits, everything lines up and stuff. Because there is one thing. So I mentioned make sure it's the best it can be. But I am like kind of an unhealthy, or I was a year ago, I was like an unhealthy amount of perfectionist to where I was constantly going back through constantly and always finding different critiques. Like that's the thing is like, if it's your own work, you will basically be your biggest critic. Like you will scour through those pages or those writings and just be like, I should have said this, or I messed up here, I messed up there. And you edit those. And then you go back later and it's like you're still finding stuff that is bugging you. And with me being such a perfectionist that I've gotten better about it. It got to the point where, are these books ever going to come out if I'm going to keep doing this? Like, because it was basically getting to the point where it's like, if I keep doing this, it could be like 5, 10 years before these things actually come out, because I'm constantly going back and these teeny tiny things that I notice that most likely no one else will ever notice, or if they notice, they don't care about, but it just like bugged me. I was like, that's the thing, not saying it has to be good enough, but make it good enough for you yourself as the perfectionist. Make it good enough for you, and other people reading it will see it as good. They won't see it as like, he's doing good enough. Because if you're like a perfectionist, like you're good enough compared to what the reader is reading is different. So I will say that definitely keep trying with that work, make sure it's nailed down. But if, like I was a year ago, if you're like that, if you're hard on yourself, perfectionist, there does eventually need to be a point where you say, when is it good enough for me to put out? So I say that because I love Dismay Avenue. I love Gallows Man, still making issues of those. But yeah, like you had mentioned before, there are some series that I'm currently writing where I'm like, I do like both of these series, but like you had mentioned, as you keep making and as you keep creating, it's like, this thing I'm writing now, I think it's going to be better than this. But that's just how a creator should kind of be. You're striving to get better and better at it. That's my long-winded way of answering 2 or 3 questions right there.
No, it's perfect, because that's exactly it. Is you're setting the bar high. You set your standard first and foremost. So you have to start with a high bar. Otherwise, you're going to just release stick figures on loose leaf paper.
Exactly.
But as you do it, as you write, every word you write is another one on the pile. Every script you finish, every script you re-edit, every panel your artist draws is another one where you're gonna find either shortcuts or different ways of doing things or ways to polish things. And it's always an evolving thing, which is cool. And it's not always better compared to worse. Sometimes it's just different. So
yeah,
part of the fun of it too. So I'm a little out of order here, but I wanted to ask about your writing process, since you started with the movie script format and then you decided these would look cool as comics. Did you reformat your script into, I guess, I don't know if it's the Marvel method or like the traditional comic method where, you got panel, this is what the shot is, these are the people in the shot, this is the dialogue?
So basically how I do it now is, let's say I'm writing a script today. I'm still starting out. I'll finish the script in a screenplay format because that's the quickest way I can get the story done. Like I need to first focus on getting the story done. That's the quickest way I can get the story done. And then from there, I will then from there get with an artist and I will then start structuring it. Usually how I do it is like by page. I like to have that artist there who I know panel layout and I know what comics should look like, but they are the professional. So I want to make sure however they see the panel should look like, I want them to be able to do that, to play to their strengths. Because I could be seeing like, oh, it should be all regular box panels, like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, that sort of thing. When they see it as this weird pattern of panels, like you're not your standard rectangle or box panel layout. So it's one of those things where I will basically have it like, this is one page, this is one page, this is one page. And then through email, we will talk back and forth about how each page with the panel should look like. That's been kind of the best way I've worked with artists. And from what I've heard from them, they like that as well because there is a structure there. There needs to be a structure there, but they're allowed that freedom that is needed with their art to form it how it needs to look like on the page. Because sometimes there are instances where I'm like, don't do that way. Let's try this way. Let's try this panel layout, or let's try this splash page or whatever it is. Sometimes it's like that, but a lot of times what they produce, what I see on that page when I get the sketches back, when I get those sketches back, I'm like, holy crap, like this is a lot better than what I was envisioning of what this page layout should look like. And that makes sense because they're the professional comic artists. Like they know how that should look like. And I know what it looks like, but when it comes to an artistic stance, they have the better eye layout for how that page should be structured.
Yeah, that's I'm kind of right there with you where you have an idea of how you want it to look, but you're working in words and they're working in a visual medium. So collaborating, I think, is awesome. And I'm sure your artists love it because they're not just like cogs in a machine. They're not just going through the motions. They want to have some creative input. Otherwise they wouldn't be artists.
Oh yeah.
So that's really cool that you kind of do a hybrid of the two, the script format and maybe not a comic format exactly, but a script format converted in some way.
Yeah.
When you sit down to write a new story, do you do, all right, here's my synopsis, here's where I want my characters to end up, here's my, I got the card outline board. do you do all that too?
For me, usually the first thing that happens is that idea, like the initial idea of the comic or the series or whatever, where it's that one sentence or paragraph idea that pops in your head, and I'll write it down in my notes on my phone. And then it might not be that day when I start writing it. It could be like a week later. I go back to the idea and then from there, flesh it out in an outline. Like I'll write basically the series outline, basically the climax, the end, all the things that I want to hit with the series. And then use that to then start working on the comic. And well, like an example is I have one comic I haven't worked on in a couple months. I want to get back into it. It's going to be a 12-issue maxi series. At the time when I had the idea and wrote the outline, I didn't know it was going to be a 12-issue maxi series. I was like, it could be 6 issues, It could be 15 issues. It could be 20 issues. I wasn't sure when I wrote the outline. Then when I wrote the whole script of the first issue, as soon as I finished the script of the first issue, I was like, holy crap. Okay. So this thing that I thought would happen in the first issue, that's not going to happen until the end of the second issue. And so it was one of those things where from there, I was starting to structure it to where it was like, okay, this is going to be 12 issues for this to, the story to flow as well as it needs to be. It's got to be 12 issues. I can't cram it. I can't stretch it anymore. Not that it is stretched, but 12 issues is the sweet spot for it. So yeah, for me, it's idea, put it in notes, do an outline. And then sometimes I'll flesh out the outline super, super detailed and then start on the first issue. And in that case, with that series, that's when I realized how long the series would be.
Yeah, that's cool that you're having that that foresight, especially relatively early in your comic career, to say this one's 12, not this one's over 10. It could be 20, but this one's 12. Like, I think that's really impressive that you can see it that clearly at that early of a stage.
Thank you.
Yeah. For something like that, would you write all 12, have an artist do all 12, have all 12 ready to go? Or would you maybe have it like 1, 2, and 3 written, the rest kind of roughly sketched out, outlined, and do like a Kickstarter for a couple and then come back a few months later? And
with something like that, I'd like to, because that's a longer series right there compared to like Gallows Man. That's going to be a 4-issue miniseries, but each issue is double size. But yeah, so it's a longer series, something like that. I'd want at least half of the series, like the first 6 issues, to be completely written out, and then have like an outline of the rest of the series. But I like to be super far ahead when it comes to the writing aspect. That way, if it does pick up traction, and let's say it starts coming out quicker than I thought it would because it's doing so well or something like that, and the artists are pumping out pages really quickly, I don't want to be like, oh, like, sorry guys, like I messed up, and I've got my day job. This is more of like, I love this is a passion, it's a hobby. If it turns into a job itself one day, great. But it's one of those things where there are priorities in my life, and I don't want to be like, well, maybe 3 weeks from now I'll get the chance to write the next issue. So I want to be super far ahead of the game in case life stuff happens.
Yeah, building that buffer.
Yeah.
So switching gears a little bit, again, just to, you do have a Dismay Avenue, I almost said Dismay Comics, Dismay Avenue Kickstarter going right now, so we should probably get people onto that.
Yeah.
So you've been working on this one, Dismay Avenue. It sounds like it's at least been in your head for a while, and these are issues 1 and 2 on your Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a bit about, well, one, the Kickstarter process, because that's a beast in itself, but then also specifically like what your offerings are for this one?
Yeah, that's fine. So specifically these issues, the stories within them, because issue 1 has one giant story. It's 40 pages long, and then a 1-page backup. And then issue 2 is 4 different stories. So all of those stories were written between 2017, like early 2017 to early 2019 is when all of those were written. And then early 2019 is when I started working with comic artists on getting these made. And so, yeah, when it comes to the Kickstarter process of getting these books, they have been done. These books are done. Issues 1 and 2 are completely done. Not just writing, not just art, lettering's done, editing's done. Just need to send it to the printer, send the files to the printer, and it's good to go. So that is something for people, some assurance for people is the books are done. You're going to get these books pretty much no later than February of 2023 if you back the book. You'll likely get it between Christmas and mid-January is likely when you'll get it though. But I put February in the Kickstarter just in case like something happens.
Always, yeah. Better to be 2 weeks early than a week late.
Exactly. Whether something happens with printer problem and I got to do recall or whatever, or something happens with the post office that's out of my control. So yeah, I have that just in case. But so with these books, it's issues 1 and 2. Issue 1 is over 40 pages long. Issue 2 is over 60 pages long. So with both issues, you're getting over 100 pages of comics. And when it comes to what is being offered through the reward tiers, you can there's basically a reward tier for any budget from $1 to $60. So some examples of this is you can get issue 1 digitally, again over 40 pages of comics, for $5. You can get issues 1 and 2 digitally for $9, and that's over 100 pages of the comics. Physical copies start at $11. And then there is an exclusive Dismay Avenue t-shirt, which I think looks awesome. I'm getting me one. My sister was like, hey, get me one. I'm like, okay, I'll get you one. The t-shirt looks terrifying and great. I absolutely love it. So that's offered. I should say this. If you don't like comics, which is weird, why are you watching this video if you don't like comics?
Right.
But if you happen to not like comics, the t-shirt is available as its own tier, so you can get the t-shirt if you want. But if you do like comics, which I hope you do since you're watching this video, you can get both issues 1 and 2, and then in the add-on section, whenever you like click your tier in the add-on section of Kickstarter, you can add the t-shirt to your order, so you can also get that. And then there's like huge great value bundles where it's like both issues signed by me and both variant covers signed by me and a whole bunch of other stuff for not a lot of money when it comes to Kickstarters. And then there's a creator value bundle, which is the highest tier. It's at $60. You get all the stuff I mentioned before, like all the copies of the comics, all signed by me, all the variants, all that stuff, as well as a bunch of other stuff. You get PDFs, and you also get PDFs of the scripts. You can look at the scripts, see if you can learn anything from my writing, be like, oh, that was pretty good. I learned something from that. Or look at it and be like, oh, I learned what not to do. He sucks at writing or whatever. That, as well as you get a 2-hour Zoom script consultation with me, which is you'll send the script in advance and I'll read through it, take notes in advance. I'm not going to do that on the Zoom call. I'll take the notes. We'll go over some stuff in the Zoom call, and then I'll ask questions. You ask questions during that 2 hours, so that 2 hours isn't spent me flipping through a script and you're just watching me read it. Like there will be a lot of benefit with that. So those are some examples of some of the tiers you can expect with this Kickstarter when you go to the Kickstarter page. But yeah, when it comes to the stories, very, very creepy, terrifying stories. Issue 1, it's a story called Program. It follows a couple named Ben and Mia who go on a movie date night on the outskirts of town. And the big Cineplex they go to is like dead. There's like no one in the parking lot. There's pretty much no one in the lobby except 2 kind of odd concessions girls and off to the side. And as the date night goes along, weird, crazy stuff starts happening. It's very much a psychological horror, that first issue. And the first third of that story Program is pretty much a true story. It was a date night I went on back in college that it was weird place we went to, weird movie theater and all that weird stuff you see in the comic happened up to like page 15 or 16. In real life, the tension died. Yeah, in real life, the tension died. We realized, oh, okay, it's not that bad. The comic is almost like a what if it did go that creepy, weird route. So that's issue 1. Issue 2, there's 4 different stories. I should also mention with that first issue, the art is beautiful. Like, it's very much like atmospheric, painterly, and I think it complements the story very well. Um, so that's issue one. Issue two, there's 4 different stories, 4 different art styles, very, very different art styles. The first one is Tolls the Bells. It follows a little boy who has to stay after school one day. He gets in trouble, has to stay after for detention. And when he's staying after, uh, adults are basically gone. His teacher's gone, all this stuff. So it very much plays on the fears of isolation as well as darkness, because it gets a creepy route. I won't spoil it for people, but yeah, that art style as well is very manga inspired, very much manga inspired, specifically Junji Ito. For those that love manga horror, you know Junji Ito. The story feels like a Junji Ito story, and the art definitely feels like Junji Ito art. Gaetano Matriglio knocked out of the park with that. Second story is Raw Horror, follows a military soldier who wakes up at his house, but it feels very unfamiliar. And I'll leave it at that. The art style is done by Jade Sky. She did the art for the movie theater one program. And this one is even more like atmospheric, surreal, dream-like, painterly art style. It's really beautiful. Third story is Destination. Follows a little girl who goes to a thrift shop with her mom. And while the little girl is looking around in the thrift shop, she finds a mystical musical triangle. And when she strikes it, she gets sent into other dimensions. And each time she strikes it, it's basically gets worse and worse. Each dimension is worse than the last. It's a very great story, more a modern, contemporary comic art style, but great lighting. Federico Gillen is great with lighting with that. And then the last one is Acolyte. Acolyte feels very much like a Dr. Seuss type story starting out, and that's intentional. The artwork is it looks like Dr. Seuss art style. It follows a character named Mr. Hinklehorn, which that's a Dr. Seuss name right there, basically. And Mr. Hinklehorn is going about his daily life, and he's just taking crap from everyone, from his boss at work, from people cutting him off in traffic, from people at the grocery store, taking all this crap from people, but all while maintaining and keeping a smile. And he just says, "Oh, thank you, sir," or "Have a nice day." It's like something's up with Mr. Hinklehorn. This guy's creepy. As it progresses, it's like, oh, okay, I see what is up with this guy. And I will say for people, this isn't spoiling anything. I didn't go the obvious route. He's not a serial killer. So I didn't go that obvious route, but those are the various stories that you can see with issues 1 and 2. And like I mentioned, with all of those, very, very different art styles. So there's something for everyone. I think you'll like all the stories, but there will likely be one story where it's like, I like that one a lot. So yeah, that's the 2 issues right there.
Very cool. And yeah, that's what's so fun about an anthology is that it's a short story, so they're quick to get through, but they grab you pretty quick, and there's a flavor for everybody. I mean, you just outlined 5 stories. There has to be something in those 5 that interests people. Yeah, very cool. So we're recording this on the 8th, and your Kickstarter's on until the 18th. So I'll definitely get this up before then, link in description, all that. But why don't you also tell people where they can find you, even if they watch this a month from now?
Yeah, so with social media and stuff, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Dismay Comics. You can just type in Dismay Comics, Dismay Comics on any of those platforms, and you'll see. And you can follow along with me creating indie comics, as well as I'll post random stuff here and there. Like on TikTok, I currently am going through like original comic art that I'm collecting and stuff like that. So different places you can find me, reach out to me. I'm willing to answer any questions, or if there's any indie creators that are getting into creating comics and stuff, I'm happy to answer questions. I'm not an expert. I don't want you to think I'm an expert, but I want to help out as much as I can, because when I started out, there were people that helped me out. So I just want to kind of pass that along. But yeah, those are the places you can find me at.
Excellent. Well, Brandon, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on. Dismay Avenue was awesome. I did get to take a look at them for people listening. Check out the Kickstarter at the very least. And I wish you the best of luck with it.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Brandon one more time for coming on the show to talk to me about Dismay Comics, Kickstarter, his comic journey so far, writing, the whole creative process. I love it. Can't get enough. And based on feedback, I know you guys are into it too, so very awesome. Please make sure you check out his comic. Check it out on Kickstarter. Throw him a like on social media. Anything you can do helps these indie creators keep going and keep creating. Please make sure to like and subscribe. We got a lot more of this kind of content coming, a lot more screeners, a lot more reviews, a lot more of everything, and I'm working on something big that's probably a few months out, but I started recording it today, so that's pretty cool. You're not going to want to miss out. Speaking of not wanting to miss out, make sure you listen to So Wizard Podcast every single week, wherever you get your podcasts. So Wizard Podcast can also be found on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you get multiple monthly bonus shows, audio and video. SoWizardPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, videos, merchandise, and more. We love hearing feedback, so drop us a note in the comments, drop us a line on social media. All of our accounts can be found after the show and in the show notes. And on a more personal note, a good friend and I have an ongoing comedy comic series. It's called Social Studies. You can find all of our available issues on socialstudiescomic.com. There's a ton up on Comixology, and we're working on getting them onto Global Comics, which is a newer comic platform, but really making a big dent in the comic world, so that's cool too. We're cranking at issues. Our second chapter is almost done. We've already started our pre-process on chapter 3, and we are working on how we can figure out marketing to get more eyes on. So be some of those eyes. Check it out, socialstudiescomic.com. Thanks.